Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the architectural blueprint of a high-rise food factory. We're going to completely empower you to become a true soil architect. Because look, we aren't just talking about plopping some seeds into the dirt today. No, we're looking at an absolute masterclass in geometry, thermodynamics, and biological infrastructure. It's the kind of stuff that will completely flip the way you view even the tiniest patch of land.
I actually want to startle you for a second with a massive knowledge gap. If you're out there planting in traditional flat beds right now, you are essentially wasting 70% of your land's potential. 70%. And the crazy part is you probably don't even realize it's happening. Why? Well, because you're gardening in 2 dimensions, while nature operates entirely in 3 dimensions. Trust me, it's not a lack of space that's holding your garden back. It's a lack of architectural strategy.
So here is our game plan. We are going to systematically build this biomechanical engine piece by piece. We'll start by breaking that 2D barrier, then program our microclimate zones. After that, we'll dive into the physics of thermal mass, set up some gravity-powered cascade irrigation, construct the ultimate soil matrix, and finally, redefine exactly what an urban garden space can be.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, breaking the 2D barrier. We're going from flat beds to high-rise power plants. We are fundamentally shifting the paradigm here. We're moving away from traditional surface-level planting and literally manufacturing vertical land through a tiered 45-degree angled vortex. Think about your standard flat garden bed. It operates exactly like a crowded parking lot. Your plants are just standing side by side, and as the sun moves across the sky, they inevitably cast shadows on one another. They're constantly fighting for light. Now contrast that with a skyscraper model, our spiral tower. In this setup, every single plant gets its very own unblocked solar window. Each brick tier acts as a standalone energy station. You're harvesting sunlight vertically, which means you can plant 3 times as densely without suffocating a single crop.
Let's actually do the math here, because this is where a brilliant trick of physics comes into play. You start out with a standard 2 square meter flat footprint. Pretty small, right? But by building upward in a 3-tier vortex and utilizing the vertical faces of the bricks along with terracing the soil, you dramatically expand your canvas. Your total surface area suddenly jumps to nearly 5.5 square meters. You have effectively nearly tripled your solar real estate, all while sitting on the exact same patch of ground.
Moving on to part 2, programming your microclimate zones. This is where we start hacking physics by the centimeter.
You see, the biggest failure of flat earth gardening is homogeneity. It's treating every single plant like it needs the exact same conditions, which is just false. But in a spiral, we assign our crops based on highly engineered microclimates. At the apex, or zone 1, we create a high desert. It's hot, dry, and drains instantly because gravity pulls the water right away. Perfect for tomatoes and peppers whose roots absolutely despise sitting in stagnant moisture. Then, drop down a level to the mid-tier, the Mediterranean zone. Here, you get excellent drainage but a slight damp seepage from above. It is the absolute sweet spot for rosemary and thyme to develop those rich essential oils. Down at the base, we have the lush valley. It's cool and moist, making it a sanctuary for water-heavy greens like lettuce that would normally turn incredibly bitter in that scorching top-tier sun. And finally, the perimeter acts as a bioshield, loaded up with marigolds to defend the boundary.
Now let's talk about the sheer genius of 360-degree solar programming. Because this spiral structure naturally has a north, south, east, and west face, you are literally cheating time. On the south-facing slope, your heat levers are basking in maximum radiation. But over on the north-facing slope, the tower itself is casting a biological shadow. This means in the sweltering peak of July, when everyone else's spinach is bolting and dying, yours is perfectly happy and thriving in a cool, shaded microclimate. You are doubling your growing window just by using the structural shadow of the tower itself. It's incredible.
Let's dive into part 3, the physics of thermal mass, or what I like to call your garden's active skin.
Standard garden soil is honestly pretty volatile. It bakes during the day and freezes at night, which puts your roots into severe thermal shock. To counter this, we rely heavily on thermal mass. We're using 4-hole terracotta bricks here. Now don't be fooled, these are not just decorative building materials. They are a highly advanced climate control system. Instead of the soil taking the brunt of that brutal thermal shock, the terracotta bricks step up. They absorb the intense daytime heat, keeping the root zones nice and cool. Then, when the sun goes down and temperatures drop, those battery-like bricks slowly release that stored energy as infrared heat. It creates this beautifully stable micro-greenhouse effect during freezing nights. And the brilliance of Terracotta goes even further into what we call the evaporative engine. Unlike a cheap plastic pot that just traps heat and literally boils your roots, Terracotta breathes. As moisture seeps into the microscopic pores of the brick, it evaporates on the outside. This basic thermodynamic process actively cools the surface, acting like a biological refrigerator. It can drop internal soil temperatures by up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. You are literally hacking your USDA hardiness zone. Between the evaporative cooling in the summer and the radiant frost protection shield in the spring and fall, which by the way extends 3 to 5 inches deep, you are granting yourself weeks of extra harvest time.
All right, let's move to part 4, gravity-powered Cascade Irrigation. This is the hydraulic soul of the tower.
In a traditional flatbed, gravity is usually your worst enemy. It pulls water straight down and creates a suffocating hard pan. But here, gravity is our logistics manager. Most people waste a staggering 60% of their water just through surface evaporation and runoff. But in the spiral, you only ever water the top. Here's how it works. Step 1. You simply pour water into a hidden gravel-filled soak core right at the apex. Step 2. Gravity filters that water down, picking up nutrients from the top tier and self-distributing them to the layers below. You're creating this flawless vertical nutrient gradient. And step 3, because the water moves internally through the core, completely shielded by the tiers, you virtually eliminate that 60% evaporation waste.
And this brings us to an absolutely incredible concept, capillary action. So when you water the apex, gravity pulls the liquid down, right? But as that top tier inevitably begins to dry out under the scorching sun, those porous terracotta bricks, which have been soaking up water from the lower levels like a giant sponge, begin to pull that moisture back up. It creates this amazing self-regulating heartbeat. The tower is literally breathing water back up. This prevents soil compaction and opens up these rich oxygen highways, allowing your roots to access 30% more oxygen than they ever could in a flat bed.
Which brings us perfectly to part 5, the ultimate soil architecture. We are building a bespoke biological matrix. Look, if you build this incredible high-rise and then just fill it with a standard bag of cheap potting mix from the hardware store, you are failing the design completely. A high-rise building doesn't use the exact same materials for its foundation as it does for its penthouse, right? And neither should your spiral. At the apex penthouse, where all the water enters, we install hyper-drainage. We're talking 40% coarse perlite or crushed volcanic rock, so water drains in seconds, not minutes. Down in the mid-tier Mediterranean zone, we shift gears to 50% coconut coir, which holds on to that steady, damp moisture that herbs absolutely love. And finally, at the base delta, we build a heavy nutrient sink using 60% pure vermicompost. This is there to catch and hold all those filtered minerals washing down from above. You are literally tailoring the earth to the specific biological heritage of each plant.
And we don't just stop at the soil. We populate it using what we call companion guild architecture. This isn't just throwing seeds in randomly. It is pure biochemical management. We arrange these plants so they act as a living, breathing biological security shield. The apex tomatoes cast dappled shade down below to protect the mid-tier lettuce. Strongly aromatic herbs like your basil and rosemary are strategically placed to completely confuse pests like aphids. And those marigolds down at the base, they actually release a natural chemical called thiophene directly into the soil to kill root nematodes. Plus, they attract hoverflies that fly up the tower to hunt any pests on the higher tiers. When you engineer a symbiotic defense network like this, zero energy is leaked to pest stress. That means 100% of the plant's energy goes straight into production, which can yield up to 300% more output. It's just wild.
Finally, let's wrap up with part 6, redefining urban garden space. This is the core philosophy of the soil architect.
Let's take a step back for a second and look at the larger picture here. Think about what this 2-square-meter, closed-loop biomechanical engine really represents for urban survival and, honestly, for our future food security. This quote brilliantly captures the entire philosophy we've explored today. You don't need an acre of land to be self-sufficient. You only need an understanding of space, light, and gravity. We absolutely have to stop working harder and start working smarter. We need to build up instead of out, leverage thermal mass instead of artificial heaters, and utilize natural cascade irrigation instead of relying on mechanical pumps.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. Will you continue to just survive in a 2-dimensional parking lot, or are you ready to step up and actually engineer your first 3-dimensional food skyscraper? Because I promise you, the moment you harvest that first massive basket of tomatoes and fresh greens from a space no bigger than a living room rug, you are never going to look at a flat piece of dirt the same way again. So, how will you adapt this blueprint to your own space? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious, stay grounded, and happy building.